All right, all right. It is another Sunday with your girl, Friday Jones, and the National Assembly of American Slavery Descendants, bringing you another episode of Politics in Black Collective. So glad folks are here. We have our producer, Dana. Everybody say hi to Dana. Producing our show today. And, everyone has been talking about Kirby and this sensation and this song Reparations. We cannot bring you the whole song because we do not want to be catching any sort of copyright issues. But as we are talking about land and reparations, we did want to just send you the opening. Just the visuals of her music video for Reparations is just amazing, amazing, amazing. Dana, if we could hit the play on that video, that would be amazeballs. Dun, 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 dun. All right, let's do this a little differently. I'm going to see if I can try and get it. You guys look at this.
It's time for a new Mississippi. A Mississippi where we don't just walk towards the future, but we make amends for the wrongs of the past. And it is in that spirit that the state of Mississippi has decided to award those that are direct descendants of slavery and racial injustice in this state their due reparations.
All right. And if you want to follow Kirby, you can follow her at Sing Kirby Sing on YouTube, on her YouTube channel. The song is amazing. We have had, a couple of different reparations songs. We got some young people up from Northern California. I'm going to try and see if we can do a reparations show with Kirby, with the young people from Northern California. We literally from coast to coast, it is like the movement for reparations is in our music. And we know once things hit our music, it hits differently in terms of movement work. But in any event, we cannot get by. We know we're on the other side of September 11th. However, we have to talk about this week, right? This week we had the death of Charlie Kirk. His killer was very swiftly apprehended. A young man from the university where he was talking. And at this moment, like that has been so much of the talk. But for us, from a reparations lens, we cannot ignore the fact that before the killer was apprehended and turned himself in with the help of his father, we cannot miss the fact that HBCUs and even Black students at NYU, New York University, in the city of New York, received death threats, bomb threats. It was very anti-Black aggression. We also have to remember that there has been legislation, like protective legislation from the state of New York within California, where because of the Israel-Palestine conflict and because there were Israeli students and Jewish students who are American and non-Israeli were hurt or injured by some of the protesting actions, which are First Amendment. And remember, Kirk was all about First Amendment rights. Those terrorists and the people that made those threats have not been captured. And we as a people, as American freedmen people, as Black Americans, we have to contact our legislators. We have to get in touch with our Congress. If you don't know how to get in touch with your Congress, we're going to put a banner across the screen because that is our call to action this week. We saw swift federal action, swift federal response to the capture of Charlie Kirk's killer. And for our HBCU community, many of those historically Black colleges were formed at the ending of the Civil War. They were formed largely for Black folks to learn how to farm, how to be teachers, and how to be nurses. If we remember, Freedmen hospitals were where we had to go for medical care. And so if you do not know how to get in touch with your legislator, we want to make sure that you are able to reach them. And so we have the link for you to look up where they are and how you can get in touch with them, and you should be calling them. So Sydney Kamlager, you will definitely be hearing from me, because I want to impress upon our community, whether you're in Virginia, whether you are in Mississippi, New York, California, wherever. If you're in Oklahoma, Kansas, you need to be calling your legislators. You need to be pressing the Congressional Black Caucus to be seeking the prosecution of those HBCU terrorists. We cannot take aggressions and anti-Blackness laying down. We have to make sure that we are asserting ourselves and our political voice and making demands of our government in the same way. And hopefully what we will see will be some protections, because I am sure those students were harmed, were injured, were traumatized behind the threats, because those threats were unwarranted. Nowhere did we as a people have anything to do with Charlie Kirk's death. And it's important that as someone who did stand up for First Amendment rights, we got to stand up for our First Amendment rights and our 14th Amendment rights to equal protection, so that our children who are going to seek education and higher learning are not the ones becoming injured because of anti-Blackness, because of an emotional America who really doesn't know how to sit down and have a therapy session. And so I wanted to make sure that I got that out here. Today's episode, we are going to be talking about land and reparations. If you've ever heard me talk about General Sherman's Field Order 15, people like to talk about that 40 acres and the mule, but we also cannot overlook the fact that General Sherman included a way for self-governance. There was a way for us to basically declare our occupation so that we worked on our own, and also we had that land, right? That land right. And so today's guest, I'm really, really excited for us to be talking to Brea Baker. We're going to pull her up shortly. But before we do that, we open with Miss Singing Kirby and talking about Mississippi. And I want to share some information with the Black Power Summit that's being hosted by Elmer Geronimo Pratt's Gun Club. If you want more information, you can go to you can go to EGP Gun Club, and you can find out more information about the summit. You also can register for membership. And Dana, if we could go through the different slides with the different days they have from Friday, September 19th in Holly Springs, Mississippi. There's going to be everything from political education, learning how to run for office. You're going to be learning about mathematics and how to teach our kids mathematics in a way that they can learn based on how they see the world and things that relate to us as a people. And then Sunday, we have an elders brunch that will be honoring our elders. And my understanding is there's also going to be some food bag giveaways. And so I want to encourage you all. I always say, if you are a reparationist, but you're not doing any sort of reparations in Mississippi, then you're not doing it. So you will find your girl Friday down in Mississippi. Make sure you follow EGP Gun Club on social media so that you can get this information. If you're close enough, like Memphis, Tennessee, you can just drive a quick hour across the state line and really participate with some phenomenal people. There'll be a tour, historic Ida B. Wells, and some other things locally, like the small slave quarter home tour. If you haven't done it before, it's something to see, especially because what we don't know is that Holly Springs, Mississippi is in Muskogee territory. And a little bit later, I'll be talking about the win that the Muskogee tribe just had. The Muskogee freedmen in particular, the Black members of their tribe, how they basically won rights and citizenship rights based on 1866 treaties. And we know that we, as American freedmen, have some protections, law protections, civil right laws that came out of the 1800s that we need to lean into, just like the Muskegee did. I think, do we have Brea in studio? If not, I'm going to have to push through some of this until we can get her. But today, Dana, if we can change the imagery there and pull it down, we're going to be talking about her book, Rooted. And this book is all about this, in my opinion. This book is about, she says, Rooted, the American legacy of land theft and the modern movement for Black land ownership. This book to me is very necessary in this reparations movement because it gives such a wonderful historical account of land ownership, land theft. It talks about the sort of taboo part of reparations that no one wants to talk about, which is the indigenous factor. And people like me, I have been very transparent about my genealogy from my white Irish ancestors who within 2 generations of being here fought in the Revolutionary War for their freedom, and then at the same time became slave owning farmers in South Carolina, to my African imported ancestor who is like the matriarch of the United Martin family, as well as my Shinnecock Nation up there in the Hamptons in New York ancestry, which also includes Shinnecock, Blackfoot, that part. And it's a woven and interwoven story. And I really, really feel like Brea Baker in her book does a phenomenal job at tying it all together in a way where we, as part of this reparations movement, can have this conversation. One of the things that the National Assembly of American Slavery Descendants was able to do during the Office of Management and Budgets, looking at their Standard 15, and Standard 15 is what determines race and data collection in the United States. As we look at how that was happening, and we hear about the Middle Eastern, North African folks who wound up getting their designation, there was also a session for Americans at large. Certainly there was a significant portion of the descendant population that did show up in order to basically say, hey, we need to not just have a singular race and ethnic category for American freedmen. We need to have some sort of separation between race and ethnicity. And there were tons and tons of calls. There also during that time was an indigenous session for nations recognized by the federal government to participate in that process. And the National Assembly of American Slavery Descendants was the only Black organization there that was talking about the fact that we have a lot of Black people who are out of treaty. And if you are out of treaty, we can talk about dual citizenship in the reparations space. There's always this conversation about the return back to Africa. That return back to Africa has always been part of this conversation, and it's talked about in the book Rooted by Brea Baker. But for us, for a lot of us, dual citizenship does not necessarily mean some intercontinental relationship. For some of us, it means dual citizenship right here on American soil between the United States and other indigenous nationally or state. Sometimes we have tribes that are not recognized at the federal level, but they may be recognized at the state level. And there's a reconciliation that has to happen. And I feel like Brea Baker has done a really, really good job in her book with that. And one last thing, I want to just quickly congratulate the Coalition for a Just and Equitable California because they have a win under their belt with, I think it's SB. Can we pull up that visual, Dana? SB No, not that one. The other one. Yeah, California legislature passes um no, they passed, I think it's SB 515, and SB 515 is a disaggregation bill. It's going to the governor's desk, and the disaggregation bill is the first time in a long time American freedmen data is being collected. Descendant of persons enslaved data is being collected. We know in the state of California, it initially was Gavin Newsom's, I think it's SB 189 and Article 14, which is like a compilation of things that he wants to do in one big bill. And disaggregation was happening for state employees and within education and contracting. Now, SB 515, thanks to the real diligent work of Coalition for Just and Equitable California, and I believe it's Assembly Member Richardson. She is the person who authored that bill. Now the data collection will happen across all the counties in the state of California, and that's going to further some of the federal disaggregation data that was requested of the Office of Management and Budget. And then now we can go to the slide. We also, as a call to action, we are asking folks, particularly in California, to go ahead and tell Gavin Newsom that we want a no on SB 518. SB 518 is the bureau that was put together as almost an afterthought. It initially started out being housed under the Department of Justice. That part has been amended so that it's no longer under the Department of Justice, but that was also a fight, an amendment that the Coalition for a Just and Equitable California fought really hard on. And so we're asking people to please contact Gavin Newsom, ask him to please veto that SB 518. We would really prefer the bill that Senator Bradford brought forward that was picked up by Bill Asaley. Bill Asaley, as we know, was appointed by the Trump administration to be a federal judge in the state of California. However, the work on SB 518 is not done. So we have, again, the work does not stop. And sometimes even if you don't like a bill, you still fight for the amendments. And that work has definitely continued. We are going to take a stop for a quick commercial break. And when we come back, hopefully we will have Miss Brea Baker. Oh, video.
Welcome. We are the National Assembly of American Slavery Descendants. Our mission is to advance the national movement for reparations. The United States Office of Management and Budget set 5 minimum standards for collecting racial data. The Black race is defined as a person having origin in any of the Black racial categories of Africa. NAASD has recommended that the OMB disaggregate data to accomplish 3 goals: decouple race from ethnicity, create an ethnic term that exclusively identifies descendants of persons enslaved in the United States, and create an ethnic term that preserves the American freedmen political status. The ethnogenesis of the African American identity is a result of ethnocide. The identity is from a people with shared history. Race identity plus ethnic identity equals peoplehood. Together, we can fix this dilemma with the OMB. We can build a coalition, grow the movement, and create a unified demand. What can you do to get involved? You can join NAASD today at www.naasd.org. You can email the OMB using our toolkit, or you can donate to NAASD so that we can continue this work. Thank you for your time, and stay connected with us on social media at NAASDORG. We are on Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and LinkedIn. You can also sign up for our newsletter at www.naasd.org.
I guess we are about to do a book review of this wonderful book, Rooted. I'm going to hop to page 6 on this book, and Brea Baker gives a quote by Dr. Neil Roberts. And Dr. Neil Roberts is a professor and author of Freedom as Marriage, and this refers to Maroons and Maroons who fought for freedom, and how Maroons formed their own enclaves. Explored the sociological, political, and economic structures underpinning marriage, which he defines in his introduction as a group of persons isolating themselves from a surrounding society in order to create a fully autonomous community. I had never heard that term before, even though I'm very familiar with how that happened, particularly with Seminole Indians in Florida. You know, there were many folks who were escaping slavery in the Caribbean, and we know Florida, you know, you hop on the boat and you can easily get to the southern shores of Florida, and it was the Seminole indigenous people of the Americas who took in a lot of those Black folks, and they became active members of that Seminole tribe. And I pointed that out, or I wanted to point that out in the book, because we see that happening in the reparations space. We see this need for American freedmen to have a separate identity. We know from humanitarian principles, the United Nations, and the second forum of people of African, permanent forum of people of African descent, there was absolutely referencing the fact that there needed to be a disaggregation of data. That idea of creating, you know, our own group within the surrounding society. I think that we've absolutely tried to do that multiple times. We have our Black towns that were established after emancipation, that were historically burned down, that were historically put under lakes. And we, in the movement space, are seeing a resurgence of that. And I, again, had not heard that term of marriage, but that's exactly what we're trying to do with the Office of Management and Budget by having a separate ethnicity. And as it relates to the book Rooted and Land, having actual physical space in the United States that is for our people, right? That is an important part of our conversation. If I can, I want to share my screen. On page 9 of this book, Brea talks about the Declaration of Independence. Some enslaved Black people made the same choice when they escaped plantations and they fled to British lines. The British, desperate to crush their colonialist offspring, issued an extended promise of freedom for any enslaved people who joined their ranks. So we do have people who actually joined the British during the Revolutionary War. Both Black and indigenous people soon found out how right they were when in 1776, the Declaration of Independence was signed. And in 1781, when the new U.S. government was cemented following the British surrender at Yorktown, in those moments, it was clear that the liberatory language of the American Revolution extended only to white men. A lot of people, I don't think, have read the Treaty of Paris. And the Treaty of Paris, I'm going to share my screen. Give me just 1 second. But the Treaty of Paris, it's a couple of interesting things that happened with the Treaty of Paris. The first thing that I want to share is who was involved, right? Who was involved with that treaty? And we have Potent George III, who was the King of Britain. We have he's the King of Britain, France, and Ireland, right? We have who they call in the Defender of Faith, which was Duke Brunswick and Lunenburg, the arch treasurer of the Holy Roman Empire, right? And the United States. So we have Netherlands, Britain, France, Ireland. And when you all think of Rome, who else can you think of but the Vatican? And that is, to me, the heart place where indigenous people and Black folks around the world started to be displaced, because it was the doctrine of discovery that that gave, religious fanatics authorization to basically enslave people around the world. And I want to go to Article 7. Article 7 is where they actually talk about Black folks after the Revolutionary War. There shall be a firm and perpetual peace between the Britannic Majesty and the said states, and between the subjects of the one and the citizens of the other, right? Where they say basically this is a peace treaty. Hostilities by sea and land are going to stop, and prisoners on both sides are set to liberty. But if you keep going just a little bit here, without causing any destruction or carrying away any Negroes or other property of the American inhabitants, basically Britain withdraws all of its armies, garrisons, fleets from the said United States. And I'm going to read that one more time, right? Without causing any destruction, meaning they couldn't kill us, they couldn't carry us away, or carrying away any Negroes or other property of the American inhabitants, withdraw all armies, garrisons, and fleets from the United States. And so, when we have this conversation about American freedmen, it's very important for us to know our history. It's very important for us to know where we show up in documents. We were still at the ending of that Civil War. We were still chattel. And so what Brea Baker is saying is that, yeah, it was apparent that after the Revolutionary War and America was formed, it was formed for white men. We still were chattel in 1776. And that's what makes that freedman designation so vital and so important to our existence. I'm going to go to pages 10 and 11, because again, she does some things that we don't talk about. She talks about red masters. Outside of the Seminoles, the Cherokee Nation held out the longest with their fight with then President Martin Van Buren. He ordered soldiers to remove them from their land by any means necessary in service of this country. Homes were burned, livestock, tools, printing presses were all destroyed. These armed white militiamen held the Cherokee people in makeshift internment camps, marching tens of thousands of them through disease-filled terrain on riverboats. One of the other things that Brea Baker talks really, really intelligently about, it's been backed up by scientific research, is that after settlers arrived on the shores of the Americas with the level of disease that they had, they really wiped out. And when I say Americas, I mean North America as we know it, with the United States, and South America with Brazil and, some of the other Argentina, some of the other countries in South America, killed 50 million indigenous people, to the effect where the land itself reclaimed, it grew over, it forested over, because the devastation and loss of life was so significant. 4 of the 5 tribes, including Cherokee Nation led by Chief John Ross, brought them their enslaved Black people. There was an explicit expectation that Black enslaved people would carry the strenuous loads. They carted wagons, carried supplies, and led taxing work to start new on more stolen land. Somewhere between 8,000 and upward to 12,000 indigenous and Black people never made it to the other side. And that's obviously talking about the Trail of Tears. Many are surprised to hear that Black people were also casualties of this forced removal, or that Black people were enslaved by native tribes at all. But we know those 5 civilized tribes, right, were committed to slavery. And that's something that we don't talk about often. It's important that we talk about. It's important that we know it. And I'm going to go to page 14. Give me 1 second. Okay, and this is one of the things that still plagues the movement. Freedom was autonomy, and in America, the level of independence could only be achieved by having land of one's own. To own land, one needed to first be seen as human in the eye of the law. When I read that little paragraph, I was brought to the idea, which we've seen, right, from COINTELPRO, from the war on drugs, from the Black extreme identity that the FBI came up with out of nowhere, out of thin air, just a way to surveil Black folks in the United States. And Ayanna Pressley, Congressmember Ayanna Pressley, brought them to task to basically admit under oath that it was bogus. There is no Black extreme identity, but when it is discussed in circles around nationalism, and conversations around nationalism typically are tied to the land. So you have to understand the connectivity, how our government thinks about the fact that we want to own land and we should own land, but when we try to do it, it is we are criminalized. We are made to be Black extreme identifying, when no, we're trying to reclaim ultimately what was ours. She goes on to talk about the American Colonization Society, ACS, which was a group of powerful former slave owners and racists who refused to imagine, let alone truly consider, a country where Black people had the same liberties as they themselves did. They worried among themselves, what if they realize we're outnumbered and try to get revenge? The many rebellions and uprisings on plantations across the country had seeded that fear. What if they ask for back pay and reparations for the centuries of enslavement they endured? This young country, already in debt to allies like France, refused to cede land and money to former footstools. Many ideas about what to do with the Black population were thrown at the wall to see if what could be the least costly and how to spend as little as possible on Black America. Let me tell y'all, first of all, she already at the word reparations, 16 pages into this book. And those thoughts are still prevailing thoughts today. That's like the crazy part. Those thoughts are still prevailing thoughts today. People still want to pay the least. They don't want to put money, even though they literally did not compensate our ancestors. They have inheritances that have lasted 7 generations, to the point you go to Whole Foods or you go to Amazon.com and you order 7 generation cleaning products, environmentally safe products to clean your house. And that family made its money in Kentucky. I'm sorry, in Mississippi, not Kentucky, from cotton. But how many people know that? So their wealth can keep going, can have businesses going for 7 generations, but there is still this refusal to ultimately pay us. On page 14, she goes on to talk a little bit about, I think I passed it, but she talks a little bit about, here it is. She talks about herself. And she's a North Carolina girl. My family's from North Carolina. She's in the Roanoke Rapids area. Her family's from northwest of where my family is from, in Halifax County, which is a little further east and a little further south. But she says, I come from a line of Black people who saw their liberation in the land. Many of my ancestors were born in a time when agriculture was the economy. But beyond that, they saw a path to self-determination in raising children and grandchildren in safe enclaves away from white people. For a formerly enslaved person, land signified independence, namely the ability to provide food and resources for one's family, writes Dr. Elena E. Roberts. She goes on to assert that Black Americans wanted to maintain some sort of relationship with the nation they helped to build. Freedom was all of this. I come from a legacy of people who wanted to be free by any means necessary. This really made me think about Charles Blow and his return to the South and the call to return to the land. That is a really, really real conversation. A lot of times when I am invited to speak and I talk in different circles, and sometimes it's a technology circle, and I always have the conversation around the fact that if you can put up a program in rural India that is STEM based, you can put up a program in Alabama, in the Mississippi Delta, in the rural South, to set up STEM in a way where we are creating pipelines, right, of engineers who are in the Black Belt of the South that can really, really participate in this tech industry. We're always tied to the land. We don't send our dollars out of this country, but it's very important that we look at businesses, Black-owned businesses that are in the South, that we look at American freedmen businesses and see how can we invest in them? How can we support them? How can we order things made in the U.S.? We have craftsmen who do basket weaving work that actually came with us to across the Atlantic Ocean that still do fine artistry today. Quilters who do beautiful, beautiful quilting works. How many of you have a quilting work, a textile from the American South in your home? But you might go across the Atlantic and you'll bring back a similar African textile. We have got to invest in where we come from. In the rural South, I'm telling you, it is it. On page, I talked about that already, freedom and autonomy and the persecution of Black nationalism, because Black nationalism, again, is consistently tied to the land. I'm going to hop to page 17, which was a very interesting read for me because I learned a little bit of something as it related to the founding of the Department of Indian Affairs. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and read this. In the 1837 speech, former Vice President and Secretary of War John C. Calhoun notoriously defended these practices, which are referenced in the paragraph above, once stating that there never has yet existed a wealthy and civilized society in which one portion of the community did not, in point of fact, live on the labor of others. So he was pro-slavery, clearly. 13 years prior to his white supremacist monologue, Calhoun, the grandson of an Irish immigrant, so my cousin here, Mr. Calhoun, founded the Bureau of Indian Affairs without approval from Congress or the indigenous people themselves to manage indigenous people and land in relation to the new federal government. American freedmen after emancipation never received, even from a racist, any sort of long-term thought as to how we were going to exist and continue to exist in this country as citizens with our own Department of Government. And it is very, very important that we call to action and call forward, just like we're trying to do in California, an American Freedmen Bureau. That bureau used to be housed under the Department of War. I think it's interesting that Donald Trump has renamed the Defense Department the Department of War. I don't know what our ancestors are doing, but I'm paying attention to the signs. And we also, Charles Sam III is the director of the National Parks Department. He came on board in 2021, at the same time, and we've talked about this on the show. And big up to us. Follow us, like this video. This is our 18th episode. We started very humbly here, and we're still going. But in 2021, Sherrod Brown from Ohio, he actually got through Senate Bill 3667. You can look this up, the African American Burial Grounds Preservation Act, which has a sunset date, if my memory serves me correctly, as a sunset date of 2027. Charles Sams was from the Congress of Indigenous, the Department of Indigenous Affairs, and from that Congress of Chiefs that they have. And there is a small little sentence in that African American bill that says that Indigenous people can also use the funds that were allotted. And it wasn't a significant amount of funds. If my memory serves me correctly, it was only $3 million to basically preserve these different burial grounds. But if you have someone who has been with the Congress of Chiefs, who has worked for the Department of Indigenous Affairs, and now he's moved over to Parks, and he's got this little purse of money, do you think that's trickling down to Black folks? And I've said this before, NAASD has tried to meet with Director Sams III of the National Parks Department unsuccessfully. And I think that we also, in this book, Rooted, Brea talks further in the back of the book. I think maybe it was chapter 14 or chapter 15. I got Indian in my family, and she talks, I really had hoped that she was here because I wanted to hear her perspective on that chapter, but she talks about unifying with Indigenous First Nation people in order to secure our land rights. The only other place that I have heard that kind of conversation has been in this book, Native Land Talk. Native Land Talk, Indigenous and Environment Right Theories, which are land-based theories by Yael Ben-Zvi. This is the only other book. And I think that these two books really do complement each other when we start to have that conversation. The Tongva people here in Los Angeles are pro-reparations. I would like to hear, as we hear of the Muskogee people, Muskogee freedmen making strides with their citizenship within the Muskogee Nation, it would be nice, even though they were slave-owning indigenous cultures that embraced chattel slavery, it would be awesome if we could have the support, of those 5 civilized tribes so that we could assert our reparations claim as well as our land claim. And Brea Baker does talk about that in chapter 15, which is I got Indian in my family. Look, I understand the indigenous nations were fighting for their lives. They were losing tens of millions of people at one time during colonization. There were fears, I know within the Shinnecock Nation, where they were really fighting hard for the men and women to only marry within. Shinnecock Nation just became federally recognized in, I want to say 2009, 2010, somewhere around there. So fairly recently. And so, for them, it might have been 100 years, but I would love to hear the Shinnecock Nation come out in support of reparations. And that's a conversation that we have to be willing to have, again, as we reconcile out of treaty Black folks. And then chapter 17, the title of that chapter is called Another Case for Reparations. And she goes, into more history about the land, why that should be considered reparations. She talked about some legacy organizations in the reparations space. I wish I had met her before we booked her for today's show, because I personally think that the National Assembly of American Slavery Descendants and the Coalition for a Just and Equitable California, particularly as she talks about the California work for CJEC, definitely should have been named by name in this book. But she talks about Bill Gates and how he owns so much private land, and she is okay with taxation of the rich and taxation of their land to return some of the land that is privately held. She also talked about the 640 million acres of federal land that is still being held and how it should be turned over to us. I would love to exchange some theories with her. I was curious to know if she knew the author of Systematic Land Theft, Jillian Highshaw, and I've interviewed Jillian before. Hoping you guys can see this. I've interviewed Jillian before, but in her book, she has actually worked with municipalities, the federal government at different times on land policy. And so if I had to recommend the 3 books, it would obviously be The Rooted by Brea Baker, Systematic Land Theft by Jillian Highshaw, and Native Land Talk, Indigenous and Arrivant Right Theories by Yael Ben-Zvi. That, if you're going to do like a deep dive into land and reparations for Black folks in the United States, those are the 3 books that I am recommending that you have. I really wanted to know other ideas that Brea Baker may have had. She's a Yale graduate. NAASD did some curating with the Lerman Center there at Yale and their alumni, their Black alumni group, to do some programming at Yale. I would have loved to have her on to talk a little bit more about Yale, the Lerman Center, the research that has been done at Yale, what is happening, at the collegiate level for families who were enslaved by the Jesuits. Hopefully we'll have her back. This turned into a book review. I'm glad I read the book enough to talk to you all about it. This has been another episode of the Black Civics Collective. And as we close out the show, I want to encourage you all, if you're on YouTube, even if you're not on YouTube, we're trying to build our YouTube. A free way for you to support us doing this is simply just to become a subscriber to the channel and also to like the video because we want to continue to bring more programming. After we get back from Mississippi, we're going to have some exciting guests. Stay tuned. Follow us on social media. You can follow me. I am Friday Jones. You can follow the organization NAASD ORG, and that's across social media. If you like the information that we're providing to you, if you want to see us continue to engage with the United States government, as well as our educational courses, in 2026, we're going to be bringing plenty of those back. So look forward to that. Make a donation. Donate. NAASD.org. You can go. You can just click on our page. Let me tell you, if you got $5, we will make sure that it is well used. If you've got $5,000, we also will make sure that it's well used. We are really excited with some of the education forward thinking materials that we're going to be bringing next year, as well as some libraries. We're really excited. That's what's happening behind the scenes. And so make sure that you like, share, donate to us. This has been another episode of the Black Civics Collective. Until next time, enjoy your Sundays, peace and reparations. Thanks so much, everybody.